You'd be shocked how many women regret their husbands. That voice wasn't hers, but the one that answered was, I don't regret him. I just wouldn't pick him again. My hand froze on the door frame, not slammed in a dramatic movie way. Just stopped. Still, like I'd walked in on a sacred ritual I wasn't supposed to witness, except the sacred thing being gutted was me. She didn't know I was home early. They thought I was still out picking up groceries. I wasn't supposed to hear anything, but my car was acting up, so I turned around halfway. Thought I'd surprise her. What a joke. I didn't move. I stood there in my own hallway, not breathing, staring at the coat rack we bought from that awful flea market trip where we got food poisoning and laughed about it for weeks. I remember her hand in mine, how she joked it was the rack that almost killed us. Now I stared at it, like it was mocking me. The living room light was on. They were drinking something. I could smell the peach wine. She only brings out when she wants to feel young. Her friend Rena chuckled and asked, So, what's stopping you? She paused for a second. I could feel it, that hesitation, like maybe she'd defend me, say I was kind or loyal or that I tried. Instead, she said this, Honestly, it's convenience. He's safe, predictable, boring, sure, but he doesn't ask much. He barely notices anymore. My ears rang, not loudly. It was like a low-grade hum inside my skull. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. She thought I didn't notice. I noticed when she stopped locking the door at night because she didn't care whether I came home. I noticed when she started dressing nicer for errands than she ever did for me. I noticed every new silence, every glance at her phone followed by that smile she no longer gave me. I noticed everything. I left the grocery bags at the door, quietly backed out like a ghost. I didn't slam the door, didn't break a plate or flip a table like some dramatic fool. I didn't even cry until I was 4 blocks away with the windows down, so the wind could carry the sound somewhere she'd never hear it. She said she wouldn't choose me again, so I didn't give her the chance. And the part that haunts me, she never even realized I was there. But I was. And now I'm gone. I didn't go far that night. There's something pathetic about sitting alone in your own car, parked 2 blocks from your own house, trying to convince yourself that maybe you misheard, that maybe you imagined it. But memory doesn't offer mercy when the voice is hers, and the words were carved too deep. I just sat there in the driver's seat, headlights off, engine cold, gripping the wheel like it could hold me together while my mind frayed. I could have confronted her, walked in, spilled the whole thing out like some tear-airy monologue, asked her why, begged for honesty. But deep down, I already knew that what she'd said was the most honest thing I'd heard from her in months, maybe years. That realization, it's like drowning in slow motion. You're aware of the water, aware that you're sinking. But instead of fighting, you just let it happen because you're too tired to pretend anymore. I didn't go back to the house. I drove until the sky lightened. Aimless past neighborhoods I'd never cared to explore. Fast food joints that had already opened for breakfast and sleepy people starting their ordinary lives. I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour laundromat across from an auto salvage yard. There was this older man inside folding clothes alone. I envied him for that, for being somewhere he was expected to be, even if it was at 6 a.m., even if it was just to wash socks. By noon, I finally called my cousin Nate. We hadn't talked in almost a year, but he was the only person I knew who wouldn't ask too many questions. He lived 40 minutes away in a cabin behind his mechanic shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it had walls and a couch, and I needed both. When I walked into Nate's kitchen, he looked at me like I'd come back from war. "Dude," he said, "you look like death backed over you twice." I didn't respond, just dropped my bag, sat at his old oak table, and stared at a bowl of dried fruit like it held some kind of cosmic answer. After a while, I muttered, "She doesn't see me anymore." Not really. I was standing right there, and I still wasn't in the room. That's what stuck with me, not the words themselves. But how invisible I must have become for her to say them while I was within reach. Nate didn't offer a speech, just made coffee, slid a mug toward me, and said, "You staying a few days?" I nodded. He nodded back. That night, after he went to bed, I sat alone on his porch, phone in hand, screen glowing with unanswered text from Maureen. Just one word, "Where?" I didn't reply. She didn't say, "Come home," didn't ask, "Are you okay?" Just that single selfish question, "Where?" As if she were more worried about location than devastation. I turned the phone off and looked up at the stars. They didn't care either, but at least they were honest about it. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going back. Not tomorrow, not ever. Because if she wouldn't choose me again, then maybe, just maybe, I'd start learning how to choose myself. The first morning at Nate's passed like a memory I didn't quite recognize. I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching under tires and the distant hum of country radio from his garage. The cabin smelled like coffee and motor oil. There was no Maureen humming in the bathroom. No sin of her shampoo clinging to the air. No half-drunk mug of tea forgotten on the counter. Just the clink of tools and the occasional cursing of a man trying to fix someone else's rusted problem. For a while, I stayed quiet. I sat on that porch with a blanket over my shoulders like some shell of a person, watching birds fight over crust of bread Nate had tossed in the yard. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. I didn't look right away. It was like part of me hoped if I didn't see her name, it wouldn't hurt. But it was always her. Maureen over and over again. Short messages. "Please talk to me. Where are you? This isn't fair. We need to talk. I'm scared." That last one got to me. Scared of what? Losing me or losing the comfort of having someone she could ignore without consequences? I still didn't respond. Around mid-afternoon, Nate came in with grease on his hands and tossed me a rack. "Come on," he said. "You're going to help me pull a transmission. Might remind you you're still alive." I wanted to refuse, but there was something grounding about lifting something heavy that had nothing to do with emotion. So I went. We spent the next 4 hours under a car that hadn't moved since Clinton was president. Our hands covered in black sludge, our knuckles scraped raw. And for a moment, I forgot. I wasn't thinking about her or what she said, or how small I'd started to feel in my own marriage. I was just a man under a machine fighting rusted bolts and time. When we finally got the thing out, Nate sat back on his heels, wiped his forehead with his sleeve, and said, "So, you gonna tell me what happened?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Instead, I asked, "You ever feel like you're just filler in someone else's life? Like a background character in their movie?" Nate stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, once." But I left before the credits rolled. Later that evening, I sat alone again with my phone glowing in the dark. She had sent a longer message, finally one that said more than one word. "I don't know what you think you heard, but it's not what it sounded like." I was just venting. I didn't mean it. Please come home. Not what it sounded like. I could still hear her voice in my skull, perfectly clear. I'd never choose him again. That's not something you say by accident. That's not something you say unless you mean it, or unless you've said it in your head 100 times, and this was just the first time it slipped out. But what rattled me the most was the part she hadn't said. There was no apology, no explanation, just panic. Like a child caught stealing who wasn't sorry about the theft, only sorry about being seen. That's when I started thinking about the pattern, the locked phone, the sudden change in how she dressed when she went out, the smile she gave her screen when she thought I wasn't looking, the shift in her sleep schedule, the way she stopped asking me about my day and started giving short, distracted nods while scrolling. I'd ignored all of it because I didn't want to be the jealous husband. I didn't want to pry or accuse or confront. But now I had to know. I sent a message to my old friend Glenn. He used to work in IT for a private firm that handled security for divorce attorneys. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew if anyone could help dig, it was him. All I need, I typed, is to know if I was really that invisible or if she just wanted me to be. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, it wasn't grief keeping me awake. It was suspicion and the weight of a question that had no safe answer. I've heard people say that when betrayal finally surfaces, it's not one big explosion. It's a slow burn that started long ago. You just didn't see the smoke until your whole house smelled like it. That's what it felt like sitting on Nate's porch the next morning, sipping burnt coffee from a chipped mug, watching to evaporate off the grass while my stomach twisted in quiet dread. The moment I messaged Glenn, it became real. I'd crossed into that ugly liminal space where trust used to live. He replied fast, too fast. It only took him 10 minutes to ask, "You sure you want to go through with this?" I stared at the message for a while. No, I wasn't sure, but I had no choice. I needed to know if she had already moved on, emotionally or worse, while I was still setting the table every night, hoping she'd eat with me. "Yeah," I finally typed back. "Fine, everything you can. But be discreet." Glenn didn't ask questions after that. Just sent a thumbs-up emoji, which somehow made it all feel more surreal. That afternoon, Moren called me. Not text called. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding in my chest like it wanted out. I let it ring. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to hear the voice that said I wasn't worth choosing. Maybe because I didn't trust myself to speak calmly. Maybe because hearing her might have made me weak. She left a voicemail. I waited an hour before I had the stomach to press play. Adele, I don't know where you are, and I don't know what you think you heard. But this silence is killing me. I miss you. I miss our stupid breakfast routines and your dumb stories about birds in the backyard. I miss your socks always being on the wrong feet and how you leave paint on the light switches. Just call me back, please. It sounded real, desperate. Her voice cracked halfway through, and for a split second, damn me, I wanted to believe her. But then I remembered something that nearly made me drop the phone. We hadn't had breakfast together in over 6 months. I'd eat alone. She'd say she wasn't hungry. Then I'd hear the Uber notification minutes later, and she'd be off to meet a client. So, which memory was she clinging to? One from the past, or one she was trying to recreate to control the present? That night, Glenn messaged again. "Hey, I'm sending you a file. You might want to sit down before you open it." I was already sitting on Nate's floor. Actually, I'd spilled a box of old records and was too tired to pick them up. The screen lit up with a .zip folder labeled Privatal Wood. My throat dried. The first thing I saw was an email string between Morin and someone named Wesley J. It started off innocent months back. He was her former grad school professor. They'd reconnected by accident on LinkedIn. And just like that, it became late-night replies, jokes, flirtation. Then it got bolder. One message from Morin, dated just a few weeks ago, said, "I feel more alive talking to you for 10 minutes than I do being in the same house as LeWood all weekend." I stopped reading. I couldn't. I stared at my own name on her screen. Not as a husband, not even as a person, just an obstacle. I kept going. There were call logs, a couple of photos, not explicit, thankfully, but personal, private, his hand on her knee in a park I didn't recognize. Her face tucked into his neck, smiling with a kind of ease I hadn't seen in years. She hadn't just thought about leaving me. She had already started. When I finally looked up, the cabin was dark. Nate had gone to bed. The wind outside had picked up, and it rattled the porch screen like something was trying to claw its way in. I felt hollow, not angry, not even betrayed, just erased. That's the part no one tells you about betrayal. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and surgical. Sometimes it's done with such cold elegance that you wonder if they ever saw you as real in the first place. I left my phone on the table, went outside barefoot, and just stood in the dirt for a while. I didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing for sure now. She didn't forget to choose me. She had chosen someone else. And I was finally ready to stop pretending I was still in the running. The day after I saw the emails, I didn't eat. I tried, made toast, even poured cereal, but nothing made it past my throat. I just sat there with a spoon in my hand, staring into the milk like it might reveal a different version of my life. One where she looked at me the way she used to. One where my name wasn't mentioned and whispers behind my back like a burden someone was too polite to drop. Nate didn't press me. He just kept moving around the house like he knew the storm had gotten inside, and all he could do was give me space to survive it. That's the thing about Nate. He's not a talker. He's a fixer. But he knows when a thing's too broken to glue back together. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside and sat in the driver's seat of my car for over 20 minutes before I turned the key. I didn't have a plan, but there was this ache in my chest that told me I had to go somewhere, anywhere, just not back to where I was. Not emotionally, not geographically. I started driving without any clear direction. The kind of driving you do when your soul is pacing. Eventually, I found myself in front of our old high school. Morin and I met there, not in some movie scene kind of way. We weren't high school sweethearts. She was 2 grades ahead of me and never looked twice at the lanky kid who doodled in his notebooks and forgot his locker combination. But years later, we ran into each other at a friend's engagement party, and she remembered my name. Said I still looked like someone who forgot things. We laughed. She asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I never expected that moment to matter. I definitely didn't expect it to end up defining the next decade of my life. And now here I was, parked on the same street, staring at the same brick walls, wondering how many other things I'd failed to notice. The lies hadn't started with Wesley. They started long before small things she never corrected. Moments where she chose silence instead of truth. Detachment instead of honesty. Like the time she lied about being at her mother's place for the weekend, and I found out from her sister that their mom had been out of town. I'd let it slide. She said it was a misunderstanding. I believed her. That was years ago. But it hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been practice. I checked my phone. Glenn had sent one last update. There's a hotel receipt, too. Last week, 2 nights, Midtown. Her name, his initials. No denying it. It wasn't even the hotel part that gutted me. It was the timing. Last week, the same week she'd cried on the phone. The same week she'd left me that voicemail begging me to come home. She had been in a hotel with him while telling me she missed how I wore my socks backwards. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't scream. I just stared at it. This tiny device that held all the versions of her she'd hidden from me. This screen that knew her better than I did. I should have gone back to Nate's, but instead I drove back to the house. I know. I said I wouldn't. But there's something about betrayal that messes with your compass. I didn't go there to forgive her or yell or demand closure. I went there because part of me needed to see it. Not the affair, not her and him. I needed to see the space we built together, now that I knew how hollow it had become. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was gone. I unlocked the door with a spare key I'd hidden in the gutter 6 years ago, a backup she forgot existed. Or maybe she remembered and just never imagined I'd use it. Inside, everything was painfully untouched. The shoes at the door, the scarf she never wore but insisted on hanging from the coat hook like a decoration. A candle half burned on the windowsill. Lavender, always lavender. I walked through the house like it was a museum exhibit of someone else's life. Our wedding photo was still on the wall. I looked at it like a stranger. Her smile looked different now, not because it had changed, but because I finally saw the emptiness behind it. It had always been there. I'd just been too blinded by the need to believe in us to recognize it. On her desk in the bedroom, her journal set half open. I never snooped ever. But this time, I didn't feel like a husband violating trust. I felt like a man retrieving evidence from the scene of his own emotional murder. There wasn't much. But one page, one sentence stopped me cold. Somewhere along the way, I started waiting for the moment he'd leave. I just didn't expect it to hurt this much when he finally did. I put the journal down. I didn't take anything. Didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. She already knew. The only thing I did before I left was pull the ring from my pocket and place it gently in the bowl by the door where we kept our keys. It sat there like a stone on a shoreline. Small, quiet, but unmoving. Then I closed the door behind me and didn't lock it. Let her lock it herself this time. Let her decide what to protect, because I'm done protecting someone who chose a world without me in it. I didn't drive back to Nate's right away. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, half expecting to see her car turning the corner. Headlights sweeping the curb, some movie perfect moment where she'd catch me on the porch and we'd both freeze. But the street was quiet. Still as if even the neighborhood had agreed we were finished. I drove aimlessly for hours after that. Not out of confusion, but because I wasn't ready to settle back into anyone else's home, not even Nate's. I ended up at a roadside diner just past the county line. The kind of place with flickering signs and laminated menus, sticky from too many hands. I sat in a corner booth with chipped upholstery, ordered black coffee and a slice of pie I didn't touch, and just stared at the rain streaking down the window. No one knew who I was there. No one asked what I was doing. I like that being anonymous. No history, no expectations. Just a guy nursing a coffee like it might explain something to him. As the hours slipped by, I started replaying things I hadn't let myself think about for years. Like the night Morin came home late with that trembling voice, saying she'd hit a deer and her phone had died. I believed her. Of course I did. She had tears in her eyes. Her palms were shaking, and her shirt smelled like cologne that wasn't mine. But I didn't say anything then. I remember hugging her, saying, "It's okay, you're safe now." Safe from what, Elwood? Or that business trip she took last November, the one that somehow didn't show up on her company's calendar when I called to confirm the hotel. She said they used a third-party travel coordinator, and things got mixed up. I even apologized for embarrassing her by checking. I apologized. Looking back, the signs were so obvious, it's almost insulting. But here's the truth. No one likes to admit. We don't miss the red flags. We choose to paint them white. We rewrite reality in real time just to avoid feeling like fools. By the time I got back to Nate's, it was nearly 2 a.m. He was asleep, porch light still on like he'd known I wasn't done wandering yet. I stood outside the door for a full minute before going in. Like stepping back inside meant I had to start breathing again. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I looked at myself, not glanced, really looked. I stood in the bathroom, stared into the mirror, and tried to recognize the man staring back. He looked older than I remembered. Eyes tired, beard growing and too patchy. Shoulders hunched like they'd learned to carry disappointment quietly. But behind all that, there was still something there. Something flickering, like the pilot light hadn't gone out yet. So I made a decision. I went through my contacts and deleted her. Not just her number, everything. Photos, old texts, birthday reminders, all of it. Then I cleared out my email, created a new address. I even removed my emergency contact info and replaced it with Nate's. It wasn't about being dramatic. It was about stripping the rod away before it spread further. But it didn't stop there. I booked a consultation with a therapist. I've never been that guy. Never thought I needed it. But I realized I'd spent years being the man who internalized everything, smiled through disappointment, swallowed anger like pills. I'd become the man who could be erased in real time and not notice until he was gone. The session was scheduled for the next Thursday. It felt strange to look forward to something like that. But I did. Not because I thought it would fix everything, but because it meant I was starting to fight for myself, even if it was late. Then, just as I was about to settle in for a quiet afternoon, my phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered out of habit. "Is this Elwood?" The voice was male. Deep, steady, not angry, more regretful. "This is Wesley. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I think we need to talk." I froze. My jaw clenched. My first instinct was to hang up. I owed him nothing. He owed me silence. But before I could, he said something that kept my hand from ending the call. "She lied to both of us." I didn't speak. He continued. "I thought I was the one she was leaving you for. But it turns out I wasn't even the only one." The air left my lungs. I walked outside, phone pressed to my ear, the late sunlight spilling gold onto the grass, like the universe was mocking me. "Meet me," he said. "I have proof, and I think you deserve to see it." And just like that, I realized the betrayal wasn't just deeper than I thought. It was still unraveling. I met him at a roadside cafe 30 mi out of town. One of those places that tried to look retro but failed somewhere between ironic and tragic. The booze were torn. The coffee came in chipped mugs. There was a neon jukebox that hadn't worked since the early 2000s. It was perfect for a meeting like this. Anonymous, unremarkable, easy to forget. Wesley was already there when I arrived, sitting in the corner by the window with his blazer still buttoned like he didn't know how to be casual. He stood up when he saw me, polite, stiff, unsure whether I'd punch him or shake his hand. I didn't either. I just sat down. There was a moment of silence that stretched a little too long. Then he cleared his throat. "I wasn't expecting you to come," he said. "Me either," I replied. He nodded slowly, then pulled a manila folder from his leather bag and set it on the table like it was radioactive. His hands were shaking slightly. That caught me off guard. I expected arrogance. I expected some self-righteous speech. What I got was a man who looked like he'd been sucker punched by something you didn't understand. "She told me you two were over. You began, that you were living separate lives, that it was just logistics keeping you under the same roof. She made it sound like the breakup had already happened." I said nothing. There was no point correcting him. He already knew that was a lie. "She said you were controlling," he continued, voice softer now. "That you never supported her art, that you belittled her." I believed it. Still, I said nothing. "I fell for her," he admitted. Eyes down now. God help me. I really thought she meant it when she said she was finally choosing herself, that I was part of her awakening. I let out a bitter laugh, the kind that tastes like metal in your mouth. She told me I was invisible. Turns out, I was more like scenery. He pushed the folder toward me. "There's more. Emails, screenshots, recordings." She wasn't just with me, Lawood. I wasn't special. I was just next. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were printed screenshots from 3 different messaging apps, different usernames, different men. Some names I recognized, mutual friends, acquaintances from community events. Others I didn't. One thread dated back 2 years. 2 years. In one, she wrote, "He's so easy to manipulate. It's sad. I say I'm tired and he leaves me alone for days like training a dog." I didn't flinch. Wesley leaned back, watched my reaction like he expected me to explode. But I didn't, because there was nothing left in me that could be shocked anymore. "She's good at it," he said quietly. "She made me think I was her escape. I thought I was the one pulling her out of some terrible life. But when I confronted her about the others, she laughed. She said, 'Why do you care? You got what you wanted?' That hit differently." "She told you that?" I asked. He nodded. That's when I knew. She didn't care about me either. I wasn't her choice. I was just a placeholder. I closed the folder slowly, my fingers tied around the edge. "Why bring this to me?" I finally asked. "Guilt." "Partly," he admitted. "But also because I figured you deserved to know you weren't crazy. And maybe because I needed someone else to confirm I wasn't either." I exhaled through my nose, the kind of breath that carries years of tension you didn't know you were holding. "Thanks," I said after a long pause. "I don't know what I'll do with all this, but thanks." He stood up, uncertain, then offered a hand. I shook it. I didn't forgive him, but I acknowledged the moment. As he walked away, I stayed behind, folder still on the table. I opened it again, stared at those messages, those photos, those ugly, sharp little truths she left all over the internet, like breadcrumbs for destruction. And here's what stunned me the most. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I felt relief. I wasn't crazy. She really was that person. And for the first time since the moment I heard her say she'd never choose me again, I felt something else. Something fragile, but unmistakable. I felt free. And that terrified me, because now I had to ask myself, if I've been living a lie for years, then who the hell am I without her? A week passed after the meeting with Wesley. 7 days of stillness, reflection, and the kind of quiet only possible when your world's already crumbled and you're no longer afraid of the wreckage. I stayed at Nate's, mostly silent. He didn't push, didn't hover, just slid me mugs of coffee and left the porch light on every night. I think he knew I was changing, even if I couldn't see it yet. I didn't open the folder again. I didn't need to. The damage was done, but so was the wondering. That was the real gift Wesley gave me. Not the evidence, but the clarity, the knowing, the hard, merciless truth that stripped away every excuse I'd ever made for her. I wasn't invisible. She just never wanted to look. And that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. On the 8th day, I got in my car, drove 2 hours north, and booked a small Airbnb in a lakeside town we'd passed through once years ago, but never stopped in. I remembered thinking back then that it looked peaceful. We didn't have time to stay. She had somewhere to be, someone to impress, always another plan. This time, I stayed. I hiked alone, sat on a dock until sunset, ate meals slowly without anyone talking over me or checking their phone mid-sentence. I slept more deeply than I had in years. No tension in my shoulders, no racing thoughts in the dark. And one morning, just after sunrise, I stood at the edge of the lake and let it hit me. I hadn't failed. I had loved fully. Stupidly, honestly, that was never weakness. That was who I was and still am. She was the one who couldn't meet me there. I whispered it out loud just to hear it outside my own head. It wasn't me. It wasn't. I spent so long blaming myself, wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done better. But that was the old script, the one she wrote, and I kept reciting. No more. The morning I left the lake town, I turned my phone back on. There were new messages from Maureen, mostly short panic bursts. Where are you? I think we need to talk. Please say something. The last one 2 days ago just said, I'm sorry. I deleted them without reading the rest. I didn't need closure from her. I had built my own. By the time I got back to Nate's, he was on the porch with 2 cold beers and a smirk. You look better, he said, handing me one. I feel better, I replied. You done with her? I didn't even hesitate. Yeah, and more than that, I'm done with the version of me who thought her love was the prize. Nate raised his bottle to that guy. May he stay gone. We clink-dink bottles. No dramatic music, no tears, just 2 men in the fading sun, knowing life doesn't reset. It just continues. And sometimes continuing is the bravest thing you can do. I'm rebuilding now, piece by piece, my own place, my own pace. I even picked up painting again. Turns out the hands I used to make furniture with are just as steady with color. It's nothing special yet, but it's mine, and that's enough. I don't know what comes next. Love? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not looking for it. I'm looking for peace, for authenticity, for mornings that don't start with doubt. And you know what? For the first time in a long time, maybe ever, I think I'll find it because I'm not waiting to be chosen anymore.